Welcome back to the Way Out West channel. Rob here, Pres of Way Out West. You can see I've got my assistant here with me today, Mr. Bones McGurk. It's getting close to Halloween, so I thought I'd get him involved. In the last interview, I told you that we were going to split the Geoff Achison interview into two parts. Well, I've reviewed it again, and I think I'm going to three parts because it is so good. Geoff spoke to us, for an hour and a half, and so we want to get as much out to you as we can, so please enjoy. Please also hit the subscribe button, and also, Bones, is there anything you want to add? Okay, I hear
you. Alan was also big on songwriting, on inventing music, and the thing that he drilled into me was originality. He used to get really angry if somebody would come and play and by his standard were not offering anything original, even if you're playing some old song. He's like, don't copy someone else. You've got to bring your own statement to it. Well, I discovered blues music. So there I am. I'm a bass player. I was known as a bass player, and I got gigs in other bands as well. Not necessarily because I was a great bass player, but because I owned a bass.
Yeah. So
that was great because I played in country rock bands and cover bands. I did play in cover bands. I think cover bands. There was something about playing, like you say, there was great music on the charts, being whether it was Cold Chisel or Dire Straits or anything like that. But I didn't get as much enjoyment out of playing, probably because of the people I was playing with who had the mindset of like, we have to copy the record as it is, and I'd get into trouble because I'd improvise over it. I'd come up with my own ideas, and so I'd get kicked out of the top 40 band. So it just didn't interest me after a while. But I was doing a gig with Alan's group, and it was it was a private party, and in our set break, so this was still in the days where people had their big turntable stereo, was somebody put on John Mayall and the Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton on guitar, and just from the second that first riff from All of Your Love started, my ears pricked up, and I was just like, what is that sound? Oh, yeah. I went totally bananas over this music, and but then the challenge was to get hold of some of this, and it was very difficult to get out where I lived, and probably any music store at the time would have a very small collection of blues music. But one of my jazz mates, a saxophone player called Paul Walsh, so he played with Alan's group as well. And when I was talking to him about this music called blues music, and that I really needed to get hold of this Blues Breakers album, I didn't know where I was going to get it. So he invited me over to his house. He was living in London in the mid 60s when all this happened, and he used to go and see these bands. So I went over, and we had a evening over at his house, and I came out of there with a stack of albums like that that he loaned me to take home and basically to transfer onto TDK tapes. And so there's all this fantastic stuff. So there was all the John Mayall, the original one, Hard Road and Crusade with Mick Taylor.
Yep.
So those ones were on there. And then he had a Freddie King album called Texas Cannonball.
Yep.
The Allman Brothers live at Fillmore East, and even Billy Cobham's Spectrum.
Wow.
Tommy Bolton, which is real jazz fusion stuff. But it was all connected. And there was a couple of Jeff Beck albums. He had Blow by Blow and Wired, which, to be honest, I wasn't ready for at the time. But I just copied all these things onto this stack of TDK tapes, and returned the albums to him, and then I just worked my way through them. And Freddie King became my guy. But then when I heard Freddie King, it was after a few listens of that I realised, and you'd read the liner notes and get a few clues as to, well, who were those guys listening to? Where did they get this message from? And Freddie King would be mentioned. So I had this one Freddie King album on tape. And I just realised that that's the guy. He's the original guy for that playing style. Then I started going to, so I finally got my Les Paul guitar. Because all those guys on those albums, they all had the Les Paul guitars. So I got first I had a cheap Ibanez, and then I traded that in and spent all of my money on a Gibson Les Paul, which is the
gold top. Yep,
which I still have. And then I started going to Melbourne. I was just getting braver and braver. So I had to go into Melbourne, drive my car into Melbourne to get this Les Paul guitar. And that was a big deal for a little country boy that,
absolutely.
It was a big deal just to drive into Melbourne. So I think the fact that I'd gone in there because I wanted, that was the first Les Paul guitar I think I'd ever seen. And so I went in there and I got it. And that emboldened me to go to Melbourne again. I thought, well, now I can go at night and I'm going to go and see a band. And I used to go and see Blues on the Boil, Bob Settergreen's Blues on the Boil. I became a fan on one of my trips to buy records. So this became a thing. I guess I was working at that time. And so I had money. And I'd go in and I'd go to Gaslight Records and Batman Records and come back with a stack of new blues albums. And one of the albums I bought once, I just bought it because I was like, oh, that looks interesting. It was Blues on the Boil. So I brought it home and reading the liner notes, realised that this band was from Melbourne and they played at the Limerick Arms and so on. So I used to go in and see them on a regular basis. And I was always just this lonely, I'd be there early and I'd just be this lonesome little hippie looking dude because I had long hair and a beard and everything. But I was always by myself, always up the front and always just checking it out. And the drummer, Gordon Pendleton, came out one night on his break with his coffee and just sat down next to me and said, hey man, we see you here a lot. What's your story? And then he discovered that I played guitar, got that out of me. And he's like, oh, well, shit, bring it along next week. I'll get Bob to get you up to sit in. Introduced us and said, you guys should talk to each other. You both want to be in a band. So Justin Brady really sparked that off. And we put together a little group called Just Blues.
Okay.
With Marky Grundon on drums.
Oh, yeah.
And Travis, so you know Mark, and Travis Clark on bass. Yeah, but it was the coffee shop.
Yeah.
So you certainly didn't do it for the money, but the people that went along were right into the music, and even watching other acts there was great. But I was getting introduced to the Melbourne scene, and then we started playing. Actually, I'll tell you this little story. We started playing at the Sydenham Hotel in Richmond. We got a gig there, opening the show for Snake Hips Taylor.
There you go.
And so we turn up there. So the first time that we played at the Sydenham Hotel, it was sort of a biker bar. It was pretty rough around the edges. But so there I am. I got the long hair and the beard. So I'm like trying to look like I've stepped out of Big Brother in the Holding Company or something. and it's 1987. Right? So I was a real relic. And now I've got this vintage Les Paul, and so I get up on stage for our first gig. And there's the crowd all there for Snake Hips Taylor. So I'm super nervous, but I want to be professional. I want to show them I know what I'm doing. So I open up by saying, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." And from the back of the crowd, I just heard, "Get fucked." So I regard that as my first audience reaction on the Melbourne Blues. Well, that's when I officially joined the band. I started going to see him play probably early 1988.
Yeah.
Because as Just Blues were getting a few gigs around the place, and we had a couple of regular slots. We played at the Swan Hotel in Richmond every Friday night for a long time, and so people were getting a little bit of attention and getting a little bit of a following. But so many people would mention Dutch Tildas, and they tell me, man, so have you seen Dutch Tildas, or you a fan of Dutch Tildas, all this sort of stuff. I didn't know who they were talking about. Again, I'm the country boy that clueless.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of Dutch Tildas, and I initially I thought they were talking about either a band called Dutch Tildas or what Dutch music. Why would I want to go and see Dutch music? I don't know what you're talking about. Why would I want to do that? So I kind of ignored it for a while, but so many people kept saying it. I went to see him at the Windsor Castle, and I went with my girlfriend at the time, and we walked in, and he just started his set, and he used to start solo, and he's playing that big noise semi-acoustic guitar at the time, and he just started, and just by himself, the music, it was so powerful, and it was the essence of what I felt I was hearing on those blues records, recordings from long ago, and I think it was one of the things that I was lamenting with the blues records that I was getting, was that it all seemed like it had happened 20 years ago, and I just so discovering artists that were doing it at the time was a great joy to me, like Bob's band, which was fantastic. But seeing Dutch, it was like this is the real deal. Oh no, we opened a show for Dutch at the Doncaster Shopping Town Hotel, and that's what happened. So the Just Blues band, and it turned out it was one of our last gigs, but Just Blues opened a show for Dutch Tildas and the Blues Club, Doncaster Shopping Town. I remember there were posters up everywhere in the weeks leading up to it. Doncaster Shopping Town. We were so excited that Dutch Tildas and the Blues Club were going to play out here in Doncaster.
That's the art centre of Melbourne.
Yeah, don't miss out. He's travelling all the way from town. And we had the gig, so I was pretty excited about it. And so we opened the show. And Barry Hills told me years later, in fact, only relatively recently, that he and Dutch were like, who's that kid? And I think they were already having discussions with Martin Cooper was making. He was starting to think it might be time for him to move on.
Yeah.
So that timing was just in the right place at the right time.
So how good was that? We learned so much about Geoff and his growth into a musician. It's been fantastic. Great news, Way Out West is back. We've actually got a pop-up gig on Monday, Cup Eve, but it's pretty much sold out. Our next Way Out West gig on the Sunday will be November the 14th, so get on board with that one when we've got the fantastic Hoodoo Men. So hope you enjoy what you're seeing, and we'll see you in the traps. Bye for now.